യൂറോപ്പ് യാത്രയുടെ 10ാമത്തെ ദിവസം ലോകാത്ഭുതങ്ങളിൽ ഒന്നായ പിസയിലെ ചരിഞ്ഞ ഗോപുരം കണ്ടതിന് ശേഷം വൈകുന്നേരത്തോടെ നമ്മൾ എത്തിയിരിക്കുന്നത് ഇറ്റലിയുടെ സാംസ്കാരിക തലസ്ഥാനമായ ഫ്ലോറൻസിലാണ്. ലിയനാർഡോ ഡാവിഞ്ചിയും മൈക്കലാഞ്ചലോയും ഒക്കെ ജീവിച്ചിരുന്ന ലോക പ്രശസ്തമായ റെനേസൻസ് കാലഘട്ടത്തിന് തുടക്കമിട്ട നഗരമാണിത്. ഓരോ തിരിവിലും ചരിത്രം ഉറങ്ങുന്ന ഈ പൈതൃക നഗരത്തെ അടുത്തറിയാൻ ഇന്ന് ഞങ്ങൾക്കൊപ്പം ഒരു ഗൈഡുമുണ്ട്. ഈ ഗൈഡിനൊപ്പം നമുക്ക് ഈ ഫ്ലോറൻസ് നഗരം ചുറ്റി കാണാം.
Underground tunnel. And they were part of the defensive walls of the 1300s. There were 8 walls that surrounded Florence. This river was extremely important during the Middle Ages because lots of industry developed along the banks of this river. Florence has a huge population because all of these migrant workers are flocking to the city to work within these trades. These trades have formed themselves into guilds, and there were 21 guilds here in Florence, 7 major, 14 minor guilds. Florence is so rich.
This do not what.
Underground tunnel. It's different one side of the river to the other.
See, the tunnel is working now.
And they're going to open it. Yeah. In Florentine coin as early as 1252, and this was a currency used throughout Europe. And these industries will also become involved in politics as well. But the most famous leaders of Florence, they're the Medici family. The Medici family, they preside over the birth of the Renaissance. They are the great patriots of the market. Then they realised maybe lending their money was more lucrative. They become friendly with a man called Baldassare Costa. They finance him and he is elected Pope. Medici family therefore become bankers to the papacy. So this starts their rise within the city. It doesn't always go down with other wealthy families, but ultimately they will be given a title, Grand Dukes of Tuscany. The people walking up, and they're walking up to a viewpoint, and that's called Piazzale Michelangelo. So there's the first copy of David. Because it brought lots of wealth, lots of commerce. It was a means of transporting goods, communication. But the rivers also brought destruction by flood, and there have been many floods over the years. The last flood of note was on the 4th of November 1966 where the level of the water rises and bursts its banks and floods, in particular, the first area that we'll see. And so I'll show you a plaque and the level of the water on the flood of 1966. This is why the Florentines have a love-hate relationship with this water. Okay, so this is where we're crossing. And then be careful, there's also a cycle lane as well, to make sure no one's coming along. National Library. So every single book that has ever been printed is within these walls. How old is this? So this library dates from the 1600s. We're going to be coming into one of the oldest areas of their historical quarters, which is called Santa Croce. This area, where we're walking, was once outside of the original city walls. So this was where the migrant workers were settling. So this was a very poor area. There's lots of industry here. For example, the road that we're walking along is called Corso dei Tintori. So this was the road of the dyers. So this is where they are washing and dyeing all of the cloth. And then they export it back.
This library is the oldest collection.
Yes. Yeah. Square. So they have a French market here, just for a couple of days. You see also Florence is famous for its leather goods. And behind the church that we're about to see is actually a leather school.
Okay. So what are the major impacts of the Renaissance and how the people reacted to these impacts?
Well, the Renaissance is really a rebirth, renascita of classical antiquity. That basically we know what's buried underneath our feet, they start to dig up.
Okay.
And they'll start to restudy. And the artists are then inspired to compete with antiquity. And it's the Medici family who really have a sculpture garden. They're allowing all the young artists to come in and copy the great examples of the past. Really here in Florence, you have the birth of Western secular art. Okay? They will discover Michelangelo, for example, in that sculpture garden. They will also commission their scholars to translate the ancient philosophers, Plato, Aristotle. But here we find the Santa Croce Church. And this was founded in the 1200s by St. Francis. St. Francis, so it's a Franciscan church. And you can imagine he founded it here because it's a religious ethos of poverty and simplicity. Now we can see that it doesn't look very impoverished today with regards to the facade, because this will be added much later. And it's the work of a man called Niccolò Matas. And he's actually buried in front of his masterpiece. He's actually buried in front of the main doors. Now, this church today is the Pantheon of Florence. It's where all the great and good are buried. There are 200 tombs in there. So Michelangelo's buried in here. Galileo Galilei is buried in here. Machiavelli, musician Rossini are all buried within this church. It's spectacular inside with over 400 works of art. On the left-hand side, we see a statue of a man called Dante Alighieri. Dante Alighieri was a Florentine, born here in 1265. He's a soldier, he's a politician, he's also a poet. His most famous work is the Divine Comedy, where he describes his journey over 7 days through hell, purgatory, paradise. He's often regarded as the father of the Italian language because he wrote in spoken Italian rather than Latin. Now he will get involved with politics, and for his trouble he will be exiled from the city, never allowed to return. Dante Alighieri. I hate to rush, but time's not on our side.
പോവാണ്
കഴിഞ്ഞോ അടുത്ത
Okay, so in this square, every year there is the Calcio Storico. Okay, it's a very famous football match. There are 4 historical quarters of Florence, and each quarter has their own football team. Each team has 27 players. Everybody starts, that doesn't mean that everybody will finish there. Because we say it's football, but really it's a cross between football, wrestling, rugby and boxing. There are ambulances. So the whole of the square where you can see the stalls, this is all filled with sand. Actually here, can you see on the left hand side, you have a little round marble there. This is actually the halfway line of that football match.
Okay.
And the final will always take place on the 24th of June, because that's the birthday of St. John the Baptist, and St. John the Baptist is the patron saint of Florence. So every year, June, madness in this square. I mentioned that the River Arno was flooded on various occasions. Okay? The last, 1966. Now, if you look to your left, can you see that there's a plaque? It's saying the water of the Arno arrived here on the 4th of November 1966. So that was the level of the water on that particular flood. You can imagine how much it devastated the library with all of those books, and also the church as well. So lots of restoration took place over the years. You can imagine it wasn't just the amount of water, but the amount of mud. And believe it or not, once upon a time, in the centre, this was a car park, and they actually had a petrol station, which also got damaged. So it was all of the petrol, it was all the water, the mud. And so the restorers, they were nicknamed the Mud Angels for all of the restoration they did in this square.
During that show,
Sit on the roof and waited for rescue.
എത്രയിലാണ് ഫ്ലഡ് ഉണ്ടായിന്ന് പറഞ്ഞേ? എപ്പോഴാണ് ഫ്ലഡ് ഉണ്ടായി?
1966
ഇവിടെ മുങ്ങിയോ? അവിടെ വരെ മുങ്ങി.
So standing here, if you look behind you and you look at the shape of the building coming from your left and then going round to the right, this was actually the old Roman amphitheatre, so it's just outside of the original city walls. Stay here, so mind the car. But I mentioned that Michelangelo was buried within the Santa Croce church because when he was a young boy, he lived here. Lived here, yeah. So, house of where Michelangelo Buonarroti, born in Caprese, lived here when he was a young boy. Now, he was born in 1475. So this year is 500
Michelangelo
years since
Michelangelo.
his anniversary.
ആ റൂമിൽ അവിടെ അവിടെ ആ മുറിൽ
ഈ ബിൽഡിംഗ് ഒക്കെ പത്രയും പഴക്കമുള്ള
Because the wetnurse was the daughter of a stonemason, the wife of a stonemason. He was brought up on marble dust and milk. So it's already in his veins to become this great sculptor. At the age of 12, Michelangelo will announce that he's going to become an artist. And he will start to frequent a workshop that was owned by a painter here in Florence called Domenico Ghirlandaio. So this was where he was learning about drawing, about mixing pigments, and also when he realised he doesn't like painting. And so this is when he started to frequent the sculpture garden owned by the Medici family. He's in there as a 15-year-old boy, and he's copying an old faun, half man, half goat. And he copied the old faun with a forehead of teeth. And in passing, the Medici mentioned to him, if he's that old, do you reckon he'd have all of his teeth? And so Michelangelo knocks out a couple of them. And the Medici family think, wow, that boy's really quick. And so they virtually adopted him. And he moved into the Medici's home here in Florence. And you can imagine what an education he received. Classical antiquity literally at his fingertips. And he was very happy with the Medici family.
പട്ടി വണ്ടിയോ?
And Michelangelo had a strange relationship with them because ultimately he believed in a republic. The Medici family will ultimately bring an end to that republic because they become the Grand Dukes of Tuscany. Now, as we come along, if you look to your right hand side, you can see what looks like a fortress with a statue, with a poster on the side. Now, this was the captain's palace. So this was the government office. It becomes a prison. It becomes a place of execution. But today, it's the first national museum of Italy. And this road that we can see in front of us was the original city wall. So the captain's palace was just outside, and then to the left, can you see that there's a very tall spire? And this was the first monastery within the original city walls. Dante's poem is read out loud for the first time within that monastery. You'll see the top of the cathedral dome.
Cathedral dome, top of.
Yeah. On the horse, this is Cosimo I of the Medici family, and he is given the title Grand Duke of Tuscany, and he's the man that will commission many of the statues within this square, just to remind everybody that he's in charge, because his predecessor had been assassinated. He will put his political symbol throughout the city.
Actually, when it was happened,
Sorry?
1400 or?
No, he will get the title in 1565. Now, the Medici family, they have been in Florence since the 1200s. They have been part of those guilds, so involved in politics. So we have to wait hundreds of years before they will finally get a title. They will infiltrate into a Republican government. Commission the fountain that you can see. This was the first time the Florentines had fresh water coming into the city, thanks to Cosimo. You find standing just in the centre, God of the Queen next. And as we come round, look at his face. He's basically saying to the Florentines, you know I am like a god. I'm giving you fresh water, more money. I mean, what more do you want from me? And all of the statues within this square, they're all original bar 3. There are only 3 copies in this square. So we have a little lion, Marzocco. We have Judith chopping the head of Holofernes. And then we find our most famous copy of the square, the statue of David. Now, this is where I'll tell you when I'll do the statue now. So the branch of the statue of David, we only see a copy today, but this is where the original stood. The original stood here for 369 years. It's not, however, It was actually commissioned for the cathedral. And this is why we're looking at that religious figure of David, that young shepherd boy who will defeat Goliath, which is why he's got the sling on his shoulder. Now, the statue will be placed here as a symbol of liberty and of a republic. All of the other statues, they're all original. We have Hercules carrying Cacus, so one of the 12 labours of Hercules. And then we find our most which is a bronze statue.
ഹെർക്കുലീസ് ഡാവിഡ് ഒറിജിനൽ അല്ലേ
So
ഇത്?
here we
ഇത് ഒറിജിനൽ
find
അല്ല
Perseus
പിന്നെ വെച്ചാലേ
holding up the head of Medusa. Can you see snakes for her hair, blood gushing from her severed neck? Perseus is standing on the fallen body of Medusa, again that blood surging from her neck. Now this is a masterpiece because bronze is extremely hard to do. You need an outer clay model, inner clay model, in between the two foot of bronze. There's so much detail with this work. Now, it had been commissioned to the artist by Cosimo I, because he'd asked the Florentines a question, what more do you want from me? Well, there was the answer. If you want anything else, I'll chop your head off. So it wasn't very subtle. And the artist has got a lot riding on this statue, and he was a man called Benvenuto Cellini. He was very confident, you could say quite arrogant. And so he thinks to himself, of course I'm going to create the greatest bronze statue. So I think I'll put my name on it. So coming across the belt of Perseus is his name, Benvenuto Cellini. And the other great masterpiece to show you is here on our right hand side. And we can see 3 figures intertwined. And this is the work of a Flemish artist called Giambologna. Now he's come to Florence, he's working for the Medici family, originally just concerned with small to medium sized work. You can imagine though, a bit like us, when we walk into this square, we see all these huge monumental works. So he thinks to himself, I'm going to give it a go, I'm going to try. So the 3 figures are the work of a Flemish artist called Giambologna. Yeah, who's come to Florence and is working for the Medici family. But when he's here, he's doing small to medium-sized works. But as he wanders around Florence, he sees all of these huge monumental works. So he thinks to himself, I'm going to give it a go, I'm going to try. And Michelangelo had said to him previously, yeah, you are a good sculptor, just maybe not so good at group works. And so this was actually a trial to see whether he could do it. And he carved from one single block of marble these 3 figures intertwined. Now this was the first time ever he had a statue of 360 degrees. There's no front or back to this work. And this is an original from 1583.
Can I explain?
Yeah.
So, ഒരു വേറൊരു
What's this?
No, it's okay.
പറഞ്ഞു
What was his name? I forgot.
Giambologna.
ജംബലോണിയ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ വേറൊരു വേറൊരു സ്കൾപ്ചർ ഫ്ലോറൻസിൽ വന്നു. അങ്ങനെ അയാൾ വന്നപ്പോൾ അയാൾ ചെറിയ ചെറിയ ടാസ്കുകൾ ഇതുപോലെ ഇങ്ങനെ ബിൽഡിംഗ് സംഭവങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ആളായിരുന്നു, ശില്പങ്ങൾ. അപ്പോൾ അയാളോട് മൈക്കലാഞ്ചലോ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു തമാശ പോലെ ഒരു കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻ പോലെ പറഞ്ഞു, ഇയാൾ ഇവിടെ വന്നപ്പോൾ ഫ്ലോറൻസിൽ ഇതൊക്കെ മൈക്കലാഞ്ചലോ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയത്. Isn't it everything is sculpted by Michelangelo, right?
No. Michelangelo. Oh,
David.
The David was sculpted by Michelangelo. Yeah, but none of the others.
Okay. അപ്പോൾ മൈക്കലാഞ്ചലോ എന്ന അന്നത്തെ ഫേമസ് ആയിട്ട് ഇത് ശില്പങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ആൾ. അപ്പോൾ അദ്ദേഹം പറയുകയാണ് ഇയാളോട്, ഈ പുതിയ ആളോട്, പിന്നെ നിങ്ങൾ ഒരു ഗ്രൂപ്പ് വർക്ക്, അതായത് ഇതിൽ 3 പീസ് ഒരുമിച്ചാണുള്ളത്. ഇത് 360 ഡിഗ്രിയിലാണ്, ഇതിൽ മുന്നും ബാക്കൊന്നുമില്ല, ഒറ്റ മാർബിൾ കൊണ്ടാണ് ഇത് മൊത്തം ഉണ്ടാക്കിയത് ഈ സംഭവം. അപ്പോൾ അത് ഭയങ്കര ഫേമസ് ആയി. ആദ്യമായിട്ടാണ് ഫ്ലോറൻസിൽ അങ്ങനെ ഒരാൾ ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളത്.
Now, it will be given a... Now, when it's placed on the lodger, it will be given a title, a name. The abduction of the Sabine women. So all to do with the founding of Rome. But for the artist, it was, can I do it? Because what's happening here in Florence is competition. As soon as they start digging up the Greek and Roman world, then there's a competition between the artists, between the rich families, between the industries. Who can pay for the greatest material? Which artist is going to come up with the most innovative and original work of art? Florence is the cradle of the Renaissance. There is so much activity happening here. If we think of the 1,000 most important artists, 350 of them are living and working here in Florence. Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Brunelleschi, Giotto. The names go on. Over to you.
ഇതിലെ ഈ ഫ്ലോറൻസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അന്ന് റിനൈസൻസിൻ്റെ ഭയങ്കര കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻ നടക്കുന്ന സമയമാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഇവിടെ ഗ്രീക്ക് റോമൻ കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻ ഭയങ്കര, റിനൈസൻസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അതുമായിട്ട് ബന്ധമുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ അന്ന് ഇവിടെ 1000-ഓളം, ആ കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ 1000-ഓളം ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റുകളുടെ 350 ആൾക്കാർ ഫ്ലോറൻസിലായിരുന്നു അന്ന് ജീവിച്ചിരുന്നത്. അതിൽ ലിയനാർഡോ ഡാവിഞ്ചി, മൈക്കലാഞ്ചലോ സ്കൾപ്ചറാണ്, ഡാവിഞ്ചി പെയിൻറ്ററാണ്, ഒരുപാട് എഴുത്തുകാർ, ഭയങ്കര പോയറ്റായിരുന്നു. എല്ലാവരും വളർന്നതൊക്കെ ഇവിടെയാണ്. ഓരോ ആർട്ടും ഈ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയത് പെയിൻറ്റിങ് ഇവിടെ മത്സരമായിരുന്നു. ആരത് വാങ്ങിച്ചു കൊണ്ടുപോകും, അത് അവർ ഫാമിലി പ്രസ്റ്റീജായിരുന്നു. അപ്പം അതിന് ഫേമസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള മെഡിസി ഫാമിലിയാണ്.
Yeah, but there was competition between all of them.
എന്താണ് പിന്നെ
So the theme is the rape of the Sabine women. So all to do with the founding of Rome. So basically, Romulus and Remus, they found Rome. Yeah. And then they need to repopulate Rome, and so they will go to the neighbouring Sabine city and abduct the women. Okay, so that's what it's about.
ഈ റോമ സാമ്രാജ്യത്തിലെ റോമൻ റീമസ് രാജാക്കന്മാർ അവിടെ പോപ്പുലേഷൻ കൂട്ടാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് അടുത്തുള്ള നൈബറിംഗ് രാജ്യത്തെ സ്ത്രീകളെ കിഡ്നാപ്പ് ചെയ്ത് കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നു. എന്നിട്ട് ഇവർ പോപ്പുലേഷൻ കൂട്ടാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് അതിനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടാണ് ഇത് ഉണ്ടാക്കിയത്. സ്ത്രീകളെ കടത്തിക്കൊണ്ടുവന്നതിനെ
for 369 years.
369 കൊല്ലം ഒറിജിനൽ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഇപ്പോൾ കത്തീഡ്രലിലേക്ക് മാറ്റി, അക്കാഡമിക്ക് മാറ്റി.
So the building is called the Palazzo Vecchio. So this is the seat of government. It's been the seat of government since the 1200s, and it is still today the seat of government. And this is where the mayor has his offices.
Prime Minister, the officers.
Yeah, the offices of the mayor.
1200 മുതൽ ഇതാണ് ഗവൺമെന്റ് ഓഫീസ്. ഇന്നും ഇപ്പോഴും ഇതാണ് ഗവൺമെന്റ് ഓഫീസ്.
പാർലമെന്റ് ഒക്കെ.
So one of them asked why is David naked?
Because well, he wasn't always naked. Once upon a time he had a skirt, and also he had a fig leaf.
Big leaf, yes.
ഒരു fig leaf skirt ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു.
But he was naked because it's much harder to do a naked figure than it is to do a clothed figure.
ഒരു ക്ലോത്ത് ഇട്ട് ആക്കാൻ കുറച്ചുകൂടി എളുപ്പമാണ്. ഇതാകുമ്പോൾ ഭയങ്കര ടഫാണ്, പ്രയാസമാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അങ്ങനെ ആക്കിയത്. അന്നൊരു കോമ്പറ്റീഷൻ അല്ലേ? Was this the capital of Roman Empire?
Florence was founded by Roman soldiers.
Roman soldiers.
So it was a pagan Florence. And then during the Middle Ages, you have lots of industries forming themselves along the river. And these industries form themselves into guilds, and they take part in politics.
റോമൻ സാമ്രാജ്യത്തിൻ്റെ സോൾജിയേഴ്സ് വന്നപ്പോൾ അവരിവിടെ ഇങ്ങനെ വന്ന് താമസിക്കാൻ തുടങ്ങിയതാണ്. പിന്നെ ഇൻഡസ്ട്രികൾ വന്നു. അങ്ങനെ പിന്നെ ഇവിടെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഫാമിലീസ് ഉണ്ടായി. അവർ കുറേ ആൾക്കാർ കുടിയേറി. അങ്ങനെ ഇവർ പിന്നെ റോമൻ രാഷ്ട്രീയത്തിൽ ഇടപെടാൻ തുടങ്ങി. അങ്ങനെ പിന്നീട് ഇവിടെ വളരെ ഫേമസ് പട്ടണമായി.
Okay. The Medici family
Is the family still now?
No.
No.
There are no more Medici family left because they had delicate health. Yeah. So many of them died from gout. So gout is when you eat and drink too much.
ഓ
ഈ മെഡിസി ഫാമിലി ഇപ്പം ഇല്ല, അവരുടെ ഹെൽത്ത് വളരെ വീക്കായിരുന്നു, പെട്ടെന്ന് മരിക്കുമായിരുന്നു. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ഗൗട്ട് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ അസുഖം, അതായത് കുറേ ഫുഡും കഴിക്കുക, അതാണ് യെസ് യെസ്
അസുഖം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു.
Yeah, we now call it as uric acid.
Okay, so now we're going to wander down to the most famous bridge.
The bridge കാണാൻ പോകുന്നത്,
Ponte
famous
Bridge. So the statue, the gold statue, that is contemporary work, so it's not always here. It's only here for a couple of months.
കുറച്ച് മാസമായിട്ടുള്ളൂ ആ പെണ്ണിന്റെ ശില്പം, പുതിയതാണ്.
It's by a British sculptor called Thomas J. Price.
തോമസ് ജെ പ്രൈസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ബ്രിട്ടീഷ് ആളാണ് അത് ഉണ്ടാക്കിയത്.
You stay with me,
Yeah,
and then
thank
we pass.
Your English is too good.
Okay, so we're going to head down towards the river.
ഈ നദിന്റെ ഭാഗത്തേക്കാണ് നമ്മൾ പോകുന്നത്, എസ്പെഷ്യലി ഫേമസ് ആയിട്ട് ഇവിടുത്തെ ബ്രിഡ്ജ് കാണാം. ഈ ഓഫീസും
Fitzy. Yes.
ഓഫീസും തമ്മിൽ കണക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന ബ്രിഡ്ജാണ് ആ മുകളിൽ. അവർക്ക് നേരെ അവിടെ നിന്ന് പാസ് ചെയ്യായിരുന്നു.
This was commissioned by the Medici family.
ഇത് മെഡിസി ഫാമിലിയാണ് ഉണ്ടാക്കിയത്.
They needed a safe passage to move from one side of the city to the other.
ഒരു അവർക്ക് ഈസി ആയിട്ട് സേഫായിട്ട് പാസ് ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടി താഴ്ന്ന പ്രശ്നമെങ്കിലും അവർക്ക് രക്ഷപ്പെടാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ്.
When we come down to the bridge, we will see that elevated corridor again.
ഈ ബ്രിഡ്ജിൻ്റെ അവിടെ എത്തുമ്പോൾ നമ്മളൊരു എലിവേറ്റഡ് കോറിഡോർ, കോറിഡോർ നിന്ന് വരാന്ത കാണാം.
So this huge U-shaped building.
ഇതൊരു യു ഷേപ്ഡ് ബിൽഡിംഗ് കേട്ടോ ഈ കാണുന്നത്, യു ഷേപ്പ്.
So today is a museum and it holds lots of Renaissance masterpieces.
ഇന്ന് ഇത് മ്യൂസിയാണ്, പക്ഷേ ഇന്നത് കാണാൻ അവിടെ കുറേ സ്കൾപ്ചേഴ്സ് ഉണ്ട്, കുറേ ശില്പങ്ങളൊക്കെ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. കുറേ ഫേമസ് ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ്, ഫേമസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള അന്നത്തെ ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റിൻ്റെ ശില്പങ്ങളാണ്. ഇപ്പോൾ അവിടെ മ്യൂസിയം അതിൻ്റെ ഉള്ളിൽ.
So as we wander down, you see there are lots of statues within the niches, and these are all of the great scientists, writers, poets, all that have contributed to the cultural and artistic wealth of Florence.
ഫ്ലോറൻസിലെ എല്ലാതരം ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റിക് സംഭവങ്ങളും കൊണ്ടുവന്ന പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട പെയിൻറ്റേഴ്സ്, റൈറ്റേഴ്സ്, പോയറ്റ്സ്, അവരുടെയൊക്കെ സ്കൾപ്ചേഴ്സാണ്, ശില്പങ്ങളാണ്. But Da Vinci's Mona Lisa is there.
Sorry?
Da Vinci's Mona Lisa is there.
The statue?
No, Da Vinci's painting.
Inside this museum, there are 3 paintings by Leonardo da Vinci. There's one by Michelangelo, and there are many paintings by Botticelli. The very famous Birth of Venus.
ഇതിൻ്റെ ഉള്ളിൽ എന്താ പറയുക കുറേ പെയിൻറ്റിങ്സ് ഉണ്ട്. Da Vinciൻ്റെ 3 പെയിൻറ്റിങ്സ് ഉണ്ട്. പിന്നെ ബോട്ടിച്ചെല്ലി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ഇറ്റാലിയൻ ഫേമസ് പെയിൻറ്ററാണ്. അയാളുടെ ബർത്ത് ഓഫ് വീനസ് എന്നാണ് അറിയപ്പെടുന്ന ഒരു പെയിൻറ്റിങ്. അതൊക്കെ ഇതിൻ്റെ ഉള്ളിലുണ്ട്. അത് ഇപ്പോൾ Is there any copy of that birth of Venus painting here outside?
No. You're going to all have to come back. Yes. Florence first, Pisa second. Yeah?
അടുത്ത പ്രാവശ്യം നിങ്ങൾ എല്ലാവരും ഫ്ലോറൻസ്
So if you look across the road,
നിങ്ങൾ റോഡിന്റെ മേലെ
so here,
ഈ സൈഡിൽ നേരെ
you see the elevated corridor again.
പുറത്തോട് കാണാൻ
And it's going along the river, and then it's crossing over the bridge where you can see the square windows.
നിങ്ങൾ അതിലൂടെ നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നേരെ വന്നിട്ട് ഈ സ്ക്വയർ വിൻഡോസ് ആയിട്ട് റിവറിനെ ക്രോസ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ബീച്ചൊക്കെ കാണാം.
And it will continue through the other side of the city until it arrives into the last home of the Medici family, which was the Pitti Palace.
ഇതിലൂടെ നമ്മൾ പോവുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് നേരെ ഈ ബീച്ചിലൂടെ ക്രോസ് ചെയ്ത് ഇത് അവസാനത്തെ പോയിന്റ് മെഡിസി ഫാമിലിൻ്റെ വീടാണ്. അതാണ് പിറ്റി പാലസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്.
So the bridge you can see is called the Ponte Vecchio Bridge.
ഇതിനെ പോണ്ടി വെക്യോ ബ്രിഡ്ജ് എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്.
It's the only bridge to survive World War II. So all the other bridges of Florence are blown up by a retreating Germans.
വേൾഡ് വാർ രണ്ടാം ലോക മഹായുദ്ധത്തിൽ അവശേഷിച്ച ഒരേ ഒരു ബ്രിഡ്ജ് അതാണ്. ബാക്കിയൊക്കെ ജർമ്മൻ പട്ടാളക്കാർ നശിപ്പിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്.
It's a bridge that dates from 1345, and it's unique for the elevated corridor and also what look like the little houses. Now, originally, these houses were fishmongers and butchers. Now, you can imagine the smell that's coming from the bridge, and so they will be evicted in favour of goldsmiths, which is why we have all of the gold jewellery shops lining the bridge today.
സോ ഈ നമ്മൾ നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഈ ബ്രിഡ്ജാണ് ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനമായിട്ട് എലിവേറ്റഡ് കോറിഡോർ എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഞാൻ നോക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത് നമുക്ക് രണ്ട് സൈഡിലും കോറിഡോർ കാണാൻ പറ്റും. മാത്രമല്ല അവിടെ കൂടുതൽ താമസിച്ചിരുന്നത് ബുച്ചേഴ്സ്, അറക്കുന്ന ഇറച്ചി വെട്ടുന്നവരും പിന്നെ അപ്പോൾ ഗോൾഡ് നമ്മൾ പട്ടാമാരും ബുച്ചേഴ്സും ആയിരുന്നു ഇരുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ഭയങ്കര സ്മെല്ലായിരുന്നു അവിടെ. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ആ റോഡിലൂടെ നമ്മൾ പോവുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ആ ബ്രിഡ്ജിലൂടെ പോവുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഇപ്പോഴും ഗോൾഡ് സ്മിത്തിൻ്റെ കുറേ ഷോപ്സാണ് നമുക്കവിടെ കാണാം. Is it still the shops from by Goldsmiths?
Yes.
Butchers no more, right?
Butchers no more, too smelly.
Yeah. സ്മെല്ല് കാരണം അവർ
They get moved elsewhere. All right, so our time is up. It's very quick. So next time, Florence first, yeah?
Sure.
Okay.
ടൈം കഴിഞ്ഞു.
So I'm going to collect your boxes.
ഇത് തിരിച്ചു കൊടുക്കാൻ